So hey guys, it's Ziant again, and yes, this is Battlefield Bad Company 2. Even though I started my channel with Battlefield 3, it was not the first Battlefield I had played. I didn't come into BF3 cold. I had played Bad Company 2, and given a choice between the two, I think that Bad Company 2 is something I enjoyed more. I'm not going to say whether it's a better game or a worse game, because they're very much different games, and there's a definite piece of that makes this really matter. But I don't want to talk about my Battlefield history. I've done a gaming history series, and I might do one again in the future for new subscribers, but I want to talk about instead is the evolution of shooters, and something that I don't even think DICE has, or Infinity Ward has with their dynamic maps concept. Because that's really the big push in the two major shooters right now, is that these maps are changeable by the player. And of course you have Battlefield moments. And in Call of Duty, the single player is all about cinematic experiences that you can sometimes have when you're playing Battlefield. And of course DICE is also pushing the fact that, oh, we're moving the Battlefield moment into single player by giving you a much larger, much less straight route between objectives. But I think the shooter is starting to leave DICE and Infinity Ward behind, simply because of two games, and you can probably guess where I'm going with this, starting with Titanfall. Its blend of single player and multiplayer, and the moments and the stories that can be told both by the game designer and by the player himself. Because honestly, I think as far as controls and optimization and gameplay is concerned, the shooter has reached a pinnacle. It's not going to get any better or worse as far as the shooting is concerned. If the shooting and the controls are tight, if the bullets go where they're supposed to, and generally hit when they're supposed to, there's not much more you can do to make a shooter revolutionary anymore. That's one of the things I think COD 4 really had, and that Call of Duty in general had, was the smoothness. And then the really powerful, really registry hit detection that made sure that when you shot 3 bullets with the M16A4 in COD 4, they went exactly where you shot them, and they killed really, really quickly and really, really consistently. Now, it's about what can the shooter do story-wise? What can it do to bridge the gap between the single-player game like Assassin's Creed, like Far Cry? How can we compete when a game like GTA 5 that is not really a shooter in any sense of the term, when it makes $800 million in a single day? How do we as game developers compete with that? And of course the answer is a couple ways. First of all, you can't, because you're not GTA 5, you're not Rockstar Studios, you're not any of these studios that are selling on name only. Respawn, for example, Respawn has no name, really. For gamers in the know, the team has a name. It's the best of the Infinity Ward team. But in the grand scope of things, no one that's outside of the hardcore gaming community has a good conception of just how epic Titanfall could be. And it will be epic, because I think that Infinity Ward, or I should say Respawn, are thinking less about how can we make the shooter fast-paced and fun, as they are about how can we give players as many options as possible. Not just in the shooting standpoint, not just as a kill streak, not just as a killing potential, but what can they do on the map? One of the things that Respawn is really pushing is player verticality. Something that Battlefield has had for a long time, especially in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. And they're also pushing how can we give the player a much larger playground to play in while still allowing him to be constrained in the map and have fast-paced gunfights. And then that's where a game like Destiny comes in. Destiny is it's an MMO, but it's not. It's a shooter, but it's not. It's an RPG, but it's not. It's trying to bridge all of these gaps, and I think that's really where gaming is starting to push. Not to be defined by a moniker like it's a shooter. It's a role-playing game. It's this, and the other thing, described by the descriptors first-person shooter as it is a story game. And of course, the term game itself is a bit of a misnomer. And so I think that the shooter genre in general is going to be very, very much shying away from the COD and Battlefield cycles of single player, multiplayer, and we sort of know what we're getting every year. I feel like yearly shooters, I think and I hope, will become a thing of the past, and we'll see 2-year cycles. Rather than building a game in 18 months and hoping that it lasts enough time for the development studio to finish the old one, I think instead we'll be seeing sort of what Rockstar is doing with their online portion, spending a good chunk of time in between releases, only to then support the online component for at least 2 or 3 more years, giving a complete development team at least 3 years of good, solid development time so that they can iron out the kinks, innovate, put in new mechanics like we've never seen before, because that's one of the things that Respawn really had going for them, is that whereas before they were stuck with, Activision says, you need a Call of Duty every year. You're the best team we have. Here's a big chunk of money. Go make Call of Duty again. This time, EA is saying, here's a big chunk of money. Take 3.5 years to develop your game, and we'll market it for the last 6 months. I feel like that's going to be the next big thing. And I have this suspicion that the Medal of Honor team, Danger Close, was completely gutted into a separate studio that will develop Battlefield 4.5. And they've had a couple years to do that, to give DICE the 3 to 4 years that they really desperately need if they're going to succeed in the next Battlefield 5, or however they frame the next game to be. Because what made Battlefield Bad Company 2 successful was essentially that it was infantry-based, but it was infantry-based in a way that we had never seen before. Infantry-based with vehicles and a much lower damage model, something that Call of Duty never really had. It was always very quick kills. It was the guy who saw first won. And I think that the basics of gun balance have been established for their respective series. So Respawn doesn't have to focus so much on that. They can focus instead on player experience. And I think that's really what shooters are going to become in the next few years. Less about, is the map balanced? Because that's still important. But it's more about what can the player do in the map? What can the player do when he's not on the map, when he's in commander mode in Battlefield 4, when he's in the Titan, when he's watching the Titan come down, if he has to eject in the Titan, when he is helpless, what choices does the player have? Because the most successful games nowadays, like Grand Theft Auto 5, are not so much about the multiplayer experience or the player-to-player experience. It is instead about all the choices a player is given to make their own stories. And I think that is what's going to define shooters and the industry at large for the next generation, is choice. And I suppose I should have done the commentary on that instead of what I did, but what are you going to do?